Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have right at 3:30 on the nose. Hopefully there will be more that will be joining us for this session. Hopefully, let's see, I think I've got everything in place. Uh, Kinsey, can you see my screen with the PowerPoint slide? Hopefully that's a yes. I did not see. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with this. First of all, let me go ahead and briefly go over the contracts portion. We had before the Thanksgiving break, we had a Zoom class on contracts and employment law. I'm sorry, just contracts, just the contracts portion. So there was a review kind of make sure that you know these things. If you don't know everything that we cover today, make sure you learn them. So I'm not going to go over that again. There is a recorded version that is listed on Blackboard, and you were emailed the link as well. I think it's in the announcements section of Blackboard that shows you where the recorded version of that is located. I mentioned on here on the second bullet point that approximately 3 times the amount of material for a normal exam is contained on the final exam. And the contracts and employment law, there's just a lot of material. Man, it's really late. It's Thursday before a Wednesday exam. If you are not pretty much up to speed by now, kick it into high gear because there's a lot of material that you have to cover. For contracts law, we talked about how to form a contract, what makes a valid contract, what happens when the contract's breached, certain defenses to contracts, remedies for breach, and things of that nature. For employment law, we're going to cover things like wage and hour laws under Fair Labor Standards Act, discrimination, harassment, and much, much more. Hold on, let me get somebody else that has joined us. All right, so as I said, we're going to have a lot of different things that are contained on the exam. Today is just going to be focused on employment law. There is an entire other section, another Zoom class. It's recorded, so if you didn't make it live, you can actually go back and watch it and make sure you know the things that are contained there. Okay, employment law. What I'm going to talk about today are things that you really need to know. What I did is I took the final exam, just like I did for contracts law. I took the final exam and I went over each question that I included the things that are on the exam on this little highlight kind of thing. That doesn't necessarily mean that this covers every single thing on the final exam. However, everything we cover today is important and it is covered on the final exam. So you got to start with this. You got to make sure you understand all of this. Now, I'm also not here today to educate everyone on every topic that's here. This is more of a highlighted kind of thing on what the most important things are as it relates to your final exam in this area. There's way too much material that it would take 5, 6, 10 hours to go over everything that's on here, and we don't have that much time. And that's not the purpose for this review. Although if you have a specific question, you can feel free to ask that specific question. Okay. The Americans with Disabilities Act. Oh, and now let me go ahead and mention this before anybody says anything. As usual, this class is being recorded. It is live on YouTube, so keep that in mind. Don't ask me anything that relates to you individually, even if you happen to be the only person on, or there's 2 other people on the class with you. Only ask general questions to the class, and we can address those as they occur. Okay. Americans with Disabilities Act. Make sure you understand things like what a reasonable accommodation is. You probably need to know, how that reasonable accommodation is to occur. Let me let somebody else in, and I'll just keep going. Need to understand when it applies, when it doesn't apply. Does it apply in all areas? Do you always have to make an exception? Or an accommodation, not an exception. Do you always have to make an accommodation for someone with a disability? Are there circumstances in which you don't have to do that? And what are they? It's the standard for those? Be able to recognize that in a fact pattern. If there's a fact pattern that's given, well, gee, maybe they are required to do it in this situation, but you have this other factor that's in here, and because of this other factor, maybe they're not required to do it this time. They might have to do it some other time. Those are the kind of things you're going to need to make sure you understand. Bona fide occupational qualification. What is a BFOQ? What things can be a BFOQ? What can race be a bona fide occupational qualification? Can you advertise that I only want a Caucasian person to act in this capacity because it's a BFOQ? Is that allowed? Can I ever advertise that I only want a female to have this particular position? Is that a BFOQ? Can it ever be a BFOQ? Is it allowed? Understand the Fair Labor Standards Act. I like the Fair Labor Standards Act because it will apply to you as an employee or to you as an employer managing employees often. What does the FLSA require as it relates to overtime rules? Is it more than 40 hours in a week? Is it more than 8 hours in a day? Is it both? Is it neither? What does a week mean? Is it a work week? What is a work week? When does a work week start? Is it always Monday through Sunday? It be Wednesday through Tuesday? How does that operate? You need to understand all those kind of things and be able to apply it, because the exam will have something related to that on there. What is an exempt employee? How do you determine what makes an employee an exempt employee? Are there exceptions that would require that employee to be paid anyway? Does it mean that, gee, they're salaried, therefore they're exempt? Is a salaried employee always exempt? The idea or the answer there is no, they're not always exempt. A lot of people think that's the standard. And the truth is that most salaried employees are exempt employees, but not all of them. There are other standards that go into determining what an exempt employee is and when they are not. And that's contained in the materials in the lecture and the outlines and the PowerPoint slides that have been provided. Title VII. You hear about this a lot. Title VII is the most important of the harassment, discrimination type laws that are out there. It's a federal law, and it requires employers or companies to be held liable in certain circumstances for discrimination, for harassment, for those kind of things. But by whom? Who are they responsible for? Are they responsible for the employers? I'm sorry, for their employees, only their employees? Does it have to be a supervisor harassing or discriminating against an underling, someone they supervise? Can a company be held liable for a customer harassing or discriminating or something of that nature? Can they be responsible and held liable for someone they do business with who may happen to come into the company and things of that nature? How does that work? Can a company be held liable for sexual harassment of someone of the same gender? Or does it always have to be male on female, female on male? Can it be male on male and still be sexual harassment? And if it's sexual harassment, can the employer be held liable for the actions of the employee? Can an employer legally discriminate against someone because of their sexual orientation? Not harassment, but because they are gay, for example, or straight, for example. Can they legally discriminate, or can they now not legally discriminate? And will they be held liable if they do? Know the requirements necessary to pursue a federal lawsuit in the event of a Title VII violation. You know, in the materials and lectures, I talked about almost like a free bite, where an employer is not going to be held liable generally for that first time that there's an act of harassment committed by an employee or discrimination. You have to do something to hold them liable. You have to put them on notice in some way. What about a charge of discrimination? When does that have to be filed? How long do you have to file that? It's a very short time period of 180 days from something. And you need to know what that from something is. What happens when that charge of discrimination is filed? What takes place? How does it end? How does that charge of discrimination terminate with the EEOC? What do they do? What do they issue? And when they issue that, what rights does it give the employee / plaintiff? What can they do at that point? And how long do they have to do it? Those are the kind of things you need to know, not only for purposes of this exam, but for real life. This is what real life is. If something happened to you working for a company and it gave rise to one of these type of situations, you need to know all these things. You need to know, what do I need to do as it relates to the company? What do I need to do to hold them liable or responsible in this situation? What do I need to do now that the EEOC has done whatever it did? How long do I have to do these things? And yeah, you might have a lawyer with you addressing this, but number one, you need to know enough to be able to get to the lawyer and act in a timely fashion. Number two, you might be able to do something without an attorney, but you may be trying to work something out and need to know what the timeframes are. Because guess what? I have seen situations where an employee tried to work something out with the company and it dragged on and it dragged on. And guess what? The time elapsed and it was too late to pursue. They approached an attorney with a good case, but it was too late. And just like we've talked before about statutes of limitations as it relates to other cases, the same thing applies here. Be the best case in the world, but if the statute of limitations has expired, you got no case. What does at-will employment mean? You know, I watched a seminar. I'm not too old to continue to learn. I watched a seminar day before yesterday online about employment law. And I hadn't thought about this for a long time, but the speaker mentioned right to work. And he says a lot of people confuse right to work. They said, oh, well, Alabama's a right to work state, therefore we're at will employment. No, those two things don't have anything to do with each other. Right to work state, and I'm telling you something here, you can turn off your brain if you want to for purposes of the final. I'm going to ask you about what a right to work state means. I just thought it's interesting. Right to work state means that you don't have to join a union to work for a company. That's what right to work means. Now, turn your brain back on, because you do need to know what at will employment means. At will employment generally means that you can be hired or fired for a good reason, bad reason, or no reason, as long as it's not some sort of statutorily protected reason, usually federal law, not always, and also when there's no written contract to the contrary. A lot of people think, I got to give 2 weeks notice. That's what at will employment means. You don't have to. It's good practice to do that. Usually the employer appreciates it. You're not required to. At will employment means the employee can leave whenever they want to. No consequences. But it also means the employer can do the same thing against the employee and terminate them. No consequences if at will employment applies. Can they be unfair? Can they discriminate against someone because they are an Alabama fan or a Kentucky fan or an Auburn fan? Can they legally do that? Is that fair? Does fairness have anything to do with it here? Fair Labor Standards Act. I kind of already mentioned this. When must employer pay an employee? I didn't mention this part. If they're not doing any work, but the employer requires them to be there, are they still required to be paid? Say, look, you show up here, you got to be here between 9 and 12. I might put you to work. If I do, I'll pay you. If I don't, I won't pay you, but you got to be here. Can they do that? Under what circumstances must you be paid? Under what circumstances do you not have to be paid? All that's covered in the lecture and materials that have been provided. Under Title VII, what damages are available? You're speaking to an attorney here. I defend cases and that's important to my clients who I defend to know what their exposure is. And it's important to the plaintiffs I represent so they know what they may be entitled to. Can they recover front pay, back pay? Can they recover because they should have been promoted had that not been, say, discriminated against? Can they recover attorney's fees? What other compensatory damages? What kind of punitive damages, if any, are available? All those kind of things. Go back and look. Make sure you understand for purposes of the final exam. Hostile work environment. Had a case, I may have mentioned this in the lecture. I don't know. I may have prepared the lecture before this case. I don't recall. Where a company had a, goodness gracious, just their whole environment was permeated with sexual innuendo, with comments, with jokes, with pornography, with all kind of things. What makes that a hostile work environment? Does it matter if it offends you and nobody else? Does it matter if it offends everybody else but not you? Does it matter if it offends the reasonable person and you but nobody else? Those are the kind of things you need to know and understand and be able to apply in order to get the questions right on the exam, as well as know what the rights are in the real world. How can a company protect itself in the event that a charge of discrimination is lodged or a claim of harassment is raised? What do they do to protect themselves? What are their options? What happens if they say, no, 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 don't do that again, and it happens again? Who's liable? Who's responsible? What could they have done? What should they have done? What are the requirements in general for an age discrimination case? What do you have to show to set out a basic age discrimination case, or the basic requirements, I should say, for an age discrimination case? You got to show that you're discriminated against on account of your age, and that being the reason. But how do you show that? What are the basics for that? When does the Family and Medical Leave Act, interestingly, just before this class started, I mean, 10 minutes before this class started, I got a call from a former student who's now in a managerial position. And this former student was asking about the Family Medical Leave Act, and they understood and remembered about this, and had an employee that is looking in the Family Medical Leave Act. And we were discussing what options were available for them. I was very pleased that the student recalled this and knew so much about it. Again, you don't have to be a perfect expert in all these areas, but know enough to protect yourself and your company in the event you're in the position that this particular former student was in. Know enough to protect yourself if you're the employee in that particular situation. What rights do you have as well? Okay, the final exam will be 60 minutes long. It is 50 questions. There are 50 questions. 25 of them are going to relate to contract law. 25 of them are going to relate to employment law. The exam is in 6 days on December 8th, which is Wednesday, just like every other exam has been. It will begin at 6 a.m. I may even have it set at 5 a.m. I don't recall. The time difference and daylight savings time and all that may have messed me up. I don't recall, but 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't think I've ever had someone take it before around 8, but you're welcome to as soon as it opens, and it'll be open until midnight on Wednesday. Do not miss that date. I have to turn the grades in, and as you guys know, this exam counts 300 points, not 100, plus it will substitute for a missed exam. Plus, I have to drop your 3 lowest grades. And so I've got to do a lot of manual calculations and things. So as a result, you don't take the final exam on Wednesday, you're out of luck. Now, contact me if something happens. We'll discuss it. I don't know what I can do, but I can't hold up the grades. The grades have to be turned in. So make sure that you are there and available and have a good internet connection and all those kind of good things, or a nice quiet place where you can take the exam uninterrupted. Should be plenty of time. Won't be plenty of time to teach yourself this, but if you've got 3 or 4 questions out of the 50 that you need to go back and check something, well, you'll have time to do that. True, false. Every question is true, false, just like it's been all semester. You guys have done really, really well since about the 3rd exam, since 2nd or 3rd exam. You've done really, really well on figuring this out. If you have studied hard, like you would for 3 exams instead of just 1, you probably will do well on this exam. If you haven't, if you've taken it a little bit easy, it can cost you. Every question you miss is 6 points off the grade. Okay, I am done with my portion. I'm going to open it up to see if there's any questions that you guys might have for me. Don't be shy if you have one. If you have a question, there's a good chance that somebody else has that same question, and they're either a little nervous to ask the question here, shouldn't be, or they're not here with us today, but they'll watch it later and they'll be glad you asked the question. And if you don't, that's fine too. I'm not forcing you into doing that. You guys remember that, or you guys, there was a 5-point bonus opportunity placed on the blackboard for SLOs. It requires you to do a little bit of research. The answers are all in you can find them in a lot of different places, but among other places, they are in the textbook that the we didn't use a whole lot this semester, but it's actually in there as well. The bonus opportunity will close Sunday at midnight. I don't like to have it too close in time to the final. You need to be studying for the final. It's more important than 5 bonus points.
Is this the only bonus that we have before the semester is over?
Won't be another bonus opportunity. It's already Thursday afternoon, so I doubt that I'll place anything on there for Friday or Saturday.
Okay, so the SLO is the bonus opportunity.
That's right. That's right. Those 5 points that you can earn from that are all bonus. That's not like a test kind of thing. It's actually a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
So this exam is based off contract law and employment law.
That's right.
Okay.
Right. And there's 2 portions to contract law, and there's 2 portions to law. We kind of, I used to teach this class and give a comprehensive cumulative final exam where it covered everything from day one. And when I did that, I had a section for contract law formation. I had a separate exam for that. I had a separate exam for contract breach and remedies. I had a separate exam for employment law in general, and a separate exam for employment law, harassment, and discrimination. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of material. It's easily 3 times the amount of material that a regular would have. And because of it, it's worth 300 points. So it works out pretty well for that. But yes, it's only contract law and employment law.
Mm-hmm. So if we make an A or B on it, it's not gonna drop our grade that much.
If you make an A on it, it won't drop your grade at all. If you make a B on it and your average is an A, it could drop it a little bit, just depends. If B average, making a B on the final won't drop it at all either. My concern, and I think you're probably talking about where I cautioned everybody that, look, don't blow it. If you've had a great semester all semester, big 300 points, it could be worth more than that for anybody that missed an exam. But it's an exam that if you just halfway end up making a 50 on the exam, 50%, well, you're probably going to, you probably are. If you had an A, you're not going to get an A. That's like you made a 50 on 3 different exams, maybe 4 if you missed an exam. And it's just too important. It's too critical at the end of the semester to take lightly, no matter how well you've done all semester. But yes, if you do well on the exam, it'll have the opposite effect. If you've got a C average and you make an A, it up to a B to an A. It's a lot of points. There's a lot of points, 300 points out of 1,000, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth 30% of your grade if it doesn't substitute exam. It's worth 30% of your grade. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
thank you for asking questions. Others are a little nervous about doing so. And by the way, let me say this. If you have questions that, and this is for anybody that's watching this later as well, if you have questions that arise as you study for this, you can still contact me by the way that that I indicated on the syllabus. My preference would be through my personal email address. You can also, if it's not time sensitive, use the Jeff State email address. That's perfectly fine too. Or you can call or text with a question as well. Now, I'm probably not going to answer any questions after about Monday because I don't like to do last minute question things. I don't think that's fair to you or to others. But if you do have questions after this, it doesn't mean you're out of luck. You can still contact me and I'll do my best to help if I can. Okay. Everybody, good luck with studying for this exam and all the other exams if you have more than one. And if I can help you, let me know. Otherwise, you guys have a good rest of the day and a good weekend. Study hard, do well, and I'll see you when I see you.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.